The UK House of Commons and the European Parliament. Voting. The people's chance to decide who they want to run their country and represent their interests. But how does it work in the UK and Europe? Well, in the UK we live in a parliamentary democracy. That means that the government is voted into power by the people. Roughly every 5 years, the government has to call a general election. To win the general election and gain power, a party needs to win an overall majority of seats in the House of Commons. Each seat represents a voting area of the UK, called a constituency. In the months leading up to a general election, parties and candidates standing for election run publicity campaigns in each constituency. Would-be members of Parliament will often go from door to door, explaining the key issues that they fight for and asking for voter support. You'll also see party political broadcasts on the television, where party leaders outline their ideas for running the country. They also usually say why voting for their party is better than voting for anyone else. The day of the vote is called polling day. Throughout the day, all eligible British voters choose which party they'd like to see in power by heading to a polling station and marking their choice on a ballot paper. The ballot paper gets folded up and placed in a ballot box until voting closes. Votes are counted and results are announced throughout election night and the next day. The candidate with the most votes in each constituency wins a seat in the House of Commons and becomes an MP. The party with an overall majority of seats, in other words, the party with more than half of the available seats, wins the general election and becomes the new UK government. The leader of the winning party becomes Prime Minister, as long as they've won their own constituency seat, of course. This voting system is called first past the post, or winner takes all, meaning that no matter how close the result was in each constituency, the candidate with the most votes wins. When it comes to the European Parliament elections, things work a bit differently. There are over 700 seats in the European Parliament, divided up in varying amounts amongst the 27 countries that make up the European Union, with 72 seats available for UK candidates. Elections take place not in constituencies this time, but in larger electoral regions, for example the North West, Yorkshire and the Humber, and Wales. There are 12 voting regions in all, with between 3 and 10 seats on offer in each one. When it comes to campaigning, it's much the same process as in a general election. Prospective MEPs, that's members of the European Parliament, do a lot of local campaigning to try and drum up as much support from voters in their region as possible. Although MEPs will be in power in Europe rather than in the House of Commons, it's still important that they take regional and local issues into account. Voting takes place in polling stations as in a general election, so far so similar. But the first difference is that people vote for a party rather than a particular candidate. And then there are more differences when the votes get counted and the seats get given out. To best explain this, we're going to need some fancy graphics. Imagine that the election has taken place and votes have been counted for a UK region that has 10 seats to fill in the European Parliament. This time, the winning party doesn't take all the seats available. Seats are given out in rounds according to a mathematical formula. In each round, the party with the most votes wins one seat, then has their votes recalculated according to the number of seats they've won so far, and so on until all available seats have been won. So, after 10 voting rounds, all 10 seats in the European Parliament for this region have been allocated. This voting system is a type of proportional representation called the list system, because each party puts forward a list of candidates for each region. So, in our example, the first 3 candidates on both Party 1 and Party 2's lists become MEPs, while the first 2 candidates on Party 3's list become MEPs, and so on. This explains why smaller parties have more success in European elections than in UK general elections. The list system is used for electing MEPs in England, Wales and Scotland. Northern Ireland uses a different type of proportional representation. And there you have it, a whirlwind tour around the voting systems of the UK House of Commons and the European Parliament. Both democratic and both very different.